there. My name is Heidi Rojek, and I am one of the owners of Capital Books in downtown Sacramento. We've been open for just about 2 years, and we do virtual events and in-store shopping and curbside pickup and all those good things that make you feel safe during a pandemic. We're really excited to have Susannah Marin here on Zoom with us, and she's going to be interviewed by Joni Elliott. If you're interested in purchasing her book, I will put up the direct link in the chat so that you can do that from our website from wherever you are, or feel free to come into the store. To my left is Jared Childress. He is our event coordinator, and we're kind of cohorts in running events here lately. So I'm going to toss it over to Jared.
Thank you, Heidi.
You're welcome.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Jared. I am a bookseller here at Capital Books, and I'm also the events coordinator. So I have the pleasure of introducing our guests for tonight. And I would like to thank Susannah for joining us. So I'm going to say a few things about Susannah. I'm going to read a little bit because I don't want to get this wrong. She's been a lot of really high profile places, and I want to make sure we get those right. Susan is an established writer of 13 nonfiction women's issue books and nonfiction women's issue books and fiction under her pen name, Susannah Marin. She has been featured in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, the Chicago Tribune, Elle, Marie Claire. She has appeared on national television, including The Today Show, Good Morning America, CBS, CNN, and MSNBC. She has also been a guest on national radio, including NPR and Sirius Radio. Susannah joins us today to discuss her novel, A Palm Beach Scandal. You can see that, A Palm Beach Scandal. It's kind of hard to see. Yeah, A Palm Beach Scandal, which is the follow-up to 2019's A Palm Beach Wife. A Palm Beach Scandal follows two sisters as one offers the ultimate selfless act to the other, proving the very meaning of family in this novel of intrigue. So thank you for being here with us tonight, Susannah. And Susannah is joined with Joni Elliott, who's going to be facilitating the book talk tonight. So Joni Elliott believes in magic, in the magic of stories, a good cup of tea, and the power of living a creative life. She has taught writing at the University of Maryland and Brigham Young University. She lives with her husband and two daughters near Salt Lake City, Utah. For book club resources, virtual author chats, and more, visit jonielliott.com. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Joni. Thank you so much, Joni.
Great, thank you. I am excited to be with Susannah tonight. We've been able to talk before, and I'm going to hold up her book here if you didn't get to see it before. It's got some of my markings in it, but it's A Palm Beach Scandal. And it is just a terrific read. So if you haven't gotten your copy yet, I hope you'll get that. And also just a big thank you to Capital Books for hosting us tonight. I had recently seen this post from Kate DiCamillo, who is just, I think, one of the best authors on the earth today. She said, last week, and this was a few months ago, she said, I put on my mask, applied some hand sanitizer, and stepped into a bookstore for the first time since March. I went from shelf to shelf. I browsed my heart's content. I browsed to my heart's content. I didn't take 1 second of the experience for granted. On the way out the door, I heard a young girl say to her mother, I don't feel as homesick now. That's it, exactly, I thought. I don't feel as homesick now either. So I thought about that in our bookstores and our libraries and what they mean to us as a place that we call home. So thank you, Capital Books, for hosting us. And so we'll start this discussion. Susannah is just a terrific person. I always love finding that a person who's writing I love and admire is also just terrific as a human being. And Susannah is. She was kind enough to read my debut novel, which comes out next month. It's The Audacity of Sarah Grayson. She read it and has been a great encourager and endorsed my book and wrote a blurb for me. So she's been giving me advice and helping me along the way. So she's just a wonderful person in addition to being a wonderful scholar and writer. So we're excited to
Thank
be
you, Tony.
together. So anyway, I'm going to start with actually going back a little farther. And Susanna has quite a history. She's, as I told you before, she's or maybe it was mentioned in the bio, she's a professor of gender studies, and she's written a number of nonfiction books about women and the choices they make and relationships. So I would just like to know, as we get started, what led to you making the shift from writing nonfiction to fiction? And then I'd like you to tell us about what then led to you writing this particular book.
Well, I started, okay, so here's how it goes. And I think writers can relate to this. I began in college as a poet. I was lucky enough to be the student of the late, great Galway Kinnell, the poet. And after that, I began my master's degree at Columbia, and that was in fiction. So here I am shifting from poetry to fiction. I was at Columbia, ended up getting married, quit the program, bad move. Here to say that women have to really think of their own voice and what they really need, and finished at NYU pregnant with my third child 8 years later. So by then I was really committed to being a novelist, but I had also applied to journalism school, and I had also written for the school paper on occasion. So it ended up that I was taking a train. Joni, I think I actually haven't told you this. I was taking a train into the city from Connecticut, and I eavesdropped, and young women were talking about, one of them was getting married in 2 weeks, and she was talking about still seeing an old boyfriend. When I got to the city, women were at a luncheon, a birthday lunch for a friend. Women were talking about having affairs. And I thought, you know, I'm really hell-bent on being a novelist, but I have to do research on why women can end up being unfaithful, good wives and yet unfaithful. And so that became my nonfiction book, my first published book. And one curiosity about how women lead their lives, the faces they wear versus how they really feel, led me to each topic. So the great, also late, Toni Morrison is known to have said, if you don't find the book you want to read, I'm paraphrasing, but her thought was, then you must write it. And I knew that I needed a book on mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law, and I couldn't find it in a bookstore. And I knew that I needed a book on second wives because I was a young second wife. I married someone who had been married before. And so each book that I wrote was really about my investigation as a researcher into how women really, truly navigate a path. So those were the nonfiction titles. I wrote a book on female rivalry, wrote a book on toxic female friendships. I've done 3 studies on the role of wife in contemporary society in America. And then finally, about 8 or 9 years ago, maybe even a little longer ago, I decided that I wanted to go back to fiction writing. And I took all of my research from my nonfiction and put it into what I would call dramatic women's fiction. So that's the long answer.
Which is okay now, which is interesting because I thought you just first wanted to write nonfiction and then fell into fiction, but that's not it. You actually wanted to start with fiction and then did all of this nonfiction and then came to it. That's really interesting.
And also being a gender professor for so many years, I think that I've really looking at the societal construct, traditional male and female roles in our culture, and how much it really guides us. How you know, until recently, people were so afraid to break out of these roles and these expectations, societal expectations. So I've always been intrigued for fiction and nonfiction with how women really get to where they need to be and why it's so arduous in a patriarchal culture.
Thanks for sharing that. love for you to tell us about how you ended up writing. Well, you didn't end up, you chose. Tell us about your choice to write about Palm Beach. I want to, I can't remember if we mentioned this earlier, that A Palm Beach Scandal is the second book in a series of books you're writing about Palm Beach. That is a setting. They're not, I wouldn't call it those, it's not a series in that they're all about the same people, but it's a series of books that are set in Palm Beach. And so will you tell us about your connection to Palm Beach and why you wanted to write about Palm Beach and the people there?
Well, Palm Beach, and actually it's gotten, Florida is just so popular right now. There's so much heat under Florida as a place to be. But Palm Beach has been something I've known my whole life because my parents ended up going there, taking my older brother, and he and I were taken with them as children because for every school vacation, although we grew up in the Northeast, because my father was an amateur but ranked tennis player, and everything was happening in Florida, and he was actually ranked in Florida. So we ended up being there since I was a very little girl. And, because he played tennis, although it's not a diverse place even to this day, and I think, and this is interesting, because he was so good as an amateur sports person, he got invited to a lot of places that he and my mother might not have been invited to. So I was keenly conscious of this kind of society. And because we live in a capitalistic, materialistic society, I wanted to take serious issues for women based on my nonfiction and put them in a place that's supposed to be so rarefied and perfect that women can't really have secrets. Women can't really be lying about their truth. And I wanted to raise the stakes by putting it in a scene that's supposed perfection.
Which you do so well. So will you tell us about the premise of the book and the story here?
Well, as I said before, that I've written, these nonfiction women's issue titles. And one of the most intriguing of my studies that I did very early in my nonfiction career was a book on sisters called Sisters Devoted or Divided. And when I did the research and wrote that book, I knew that one day I would write a novel about two sisters who are very different. So in this novel, we have Elodie and Aubrey Cutler, and they are 8 years apart, and their mother. The story is really a triangular story. So we have a mother who's, well over 60, and her 40-year-old daughter, Elodie, and her 32-year-old daughter, Aubrey. And the sisters are very different types. And I think that Elodie, as the eldest, has done everything as she was expected. And Aubrey has been exempt from those standards. Her parents got tired. She was a lot younger. So Elodie has really been a pleaser. And I'm very interested in the idea of females as pleasers in our society, and where does it get us, and do we really face ourselves? So she's gone to the right schools and married the right guy, and she has a great job in Palm Beach running the Palm Beach Literary Society. However, she does not have a child. And one of the questions I ask of Elodie and the reader is Elodie craving a baby because our society tells us that we're incomplete as young women without children, or does she actually intrinsically yearn for a baby? And so she's told, no spoiler here, Joni, but she's told at the beginning of the novel that she just can't keep trying. And so her footloose, fancy-free, ethereal, beautiful younger sister is asked to carry this baby. And that's really part of this. That's the beginning. That would be the first inciting incident. And then we're off to the races with these two sisters.
And it's really compelling. And Susanna does a really beautiful job of illustrating the complexities of their relationship. These two sisters are very different from each other. And what happens when Aubrey agrees to do this. Is that too much of a spoiler? I hope it's not. That's what happens. Yeah, what happens when she agrees to do this, and these two sisters are so different, and all the things that ensue, and there's secrets, and I'm not going to reveal any of those, of course, but there's things that happen, things they find out about their family that they had no idea about. Will you tell us a little bit about, I think you had done some research in some of your nonfiction writing about women and the secrets that they keep and why, and tell us about how that informed your work here in A Palm Beach Scandal.
Well, as I mentioned, my first book was, we would all agree, a pretty incendiary topic on female infidelity. And yet the most provocative book that I've ever written is a book called Little White Lies, Deep Dark Secrets, The Truth About Why Women Lie. And so I really looked at why women have secrets large and small, and why we have to do that, why we're so facile at these secrets, and the behavior would be the lie. So we lie to protect the secret. Everything from lies about money, earning power, how you really feel about a sibling, a friend, your mother-in-law, your husband, your lover, to what we do just to be accepted, to not reveal, like, here's a good example. During the downturn in 2008, women told me that rather than let people know that their husbands were let go, people were being let go all over the place, they said, oh, he just is a consultant right now. Mm-hmm. And women often, because they're competitive, and I did a study on female competition, but women often don't tell the truth about their children or their success or lack of success or not feeling successful. So I really factored all that into this novel, but the deepest secrets of all, and the ones that are so destructive possibly, are family secrets. Mm-hmm. And so I really wanted that to be, a part of this story.
And it is, for sure. And it's very compelling. How do you think, well, this is a multi-generational story. We have the mother and her daughters. We even have, there's this mother-in-law relationship and her daughter as well. Tell me about mothers and their daughters, and how you felt in writing these stories. What contributes to the complexity of these relationships, and what did your research inform the way that you drew these relationships?
Definitely in doing the research and writing the book about sisters, and then a book that I wrote much more recently called You're Grounded Forever, but First Let's Go Shopping, where I looked at mothers and daughters, 3-year-old daughters to over 30-year-old daughters. And for all of my nonfiction, I'm really interviewing a diverse group of women in terms of age and race and ethnicity and religion and level of education and, where they live in America, all over the country. And what's so interesting to me, particularly when it comes to the role of wife and mothers and daughters, is that there is nothing about your earning power, your level of education, where you live, that can change these emotional issues for women. And the mother-daughter relationship is very, very fraught, as we know. So the whole idea in this novel is that, and this definitely intrigued me about mothers and daughters, and I'm thinking of your novel too, Joni, because you too have a mother-daughter triangle, right? 2 daughters.
Absolutely.
Mother. And so the idea that a mother really treats one daughter differently than another, mm-hmm. that she asks different things from one daughter than the other, and relates to one more than the other often, or aspects of each. And so for Veronica in this book, which is a multi-generational story indeed, she really is someone who's finished with her commitment to a charity that's very near and dear to her. She's ready to have fun. She's ready to be a Palm Beach wife. But her daughters are going through something so serious and so traumatic that she really has to step back from her own plan. And so one of those questions is, does mothering our daughters ever really end?
Yeah. It's interesting too, speaking of mothers and daughters, the issue of the father and daughters, and that the characters also feel in the same way that the father treats them differently, which is a big issue.
Their father really does. And again, it's about how he relates to his daughters. And the father has a lot of power in this family. So I really wanted to look at Veronica as a wife, and why do so many women contort themselves to fit into a marriage in what should be and they hope will be a happy way? Why is marriage and why is the role of wife held as so dear and important to us? Why is it so cherished? And she really has to choose. There's a lot of hierarchy in this family, and that really interests me in family systems.
Mhm. I think another important theme in your book is the decision to become a mother, wanting children or not wanting children. Do children fulfill you? You talked about, does Elodie want children really from her own self, or because that's just what she's supposed to do? So along with that becomes this theme of fertility and infertility. What would you tell us about some of the research that you did on infertility? I thought you'd, in a previous discussion, you'd done, I remember you doing some really interesting research into this, and I think into the use of sperm donors too. And didn't you? Am I remembering that correctly?
Many years ago, after the book series came out, I was actually commissioned to write a book on gestational carrier and surrogacy. And sadly, it didn't get published, which really I found devastating, but the research was unbelievable. And I went to the Center for Surrogate Parenting. This is in like the early 90s. It was in Beverly Hills. And I even got to interview, I interviewed experts all over the country, and I even got to interview the lawyer for the Baby M case, Noel Keene. So it was really something. But what was so fascinating was that the bioethics of surrogacy really were not honed in any way. And to this day, Joni, in my opinion, doing much fresher research to write this book, I found, because, you know, here Aubrey is offering to do this for her sister, but, and it happens pretty easily, so that, you know, she does conceive, but what are the bioethics of it?
Yeah.
And how does this not become such a shapeshifter for their relationship going forward? So the ramifications, the emotional and ethical ramifications of any surrogacy, not just sisters, but anyone, are very real. And so I really wanted to look at that. And the other aspect of putting it in Palm Beach is that Palm Beach, because it's so elegant and rarefied and privileged, there are a lot of judgments. And again, I did the research. And so are women only judging one another in a town like Palm Beach? No. I mean, it's all over the place. And that I can really attest to, because as I said, I've talked to a diverse population of women. But the sort of higher you go, the harder you might fall. And so that's really part of this story. You know, everyone in their circles really whispering about the Cutler baby and why these sisters would make this deal. Really judging. Why do women judge one another?
And in fact, I think initially, even the mother isn't quite sure she wants to tell about what is actually happening. Doesn't she initially want to not mention what's happening at first? I was trying to remember.
Work very hard. Women work very hard to be included.
Yeah.
When I did my research on toxic friends, you know, the study of female friendships, women said that even if they were unhappy with a friend, they were often very afraid to rock the boat, to have any conflict. And they were also afraid, not just for the friendship, but the idea that they're in the same circle or clan. So Veronica, definitely, this character embodies the idea of not being pushed out for any reason, including her daughter's one daughter's very serious need. So, that just shows how far we as women might work to belong, to not be measured.
Well, one of the things that I like that you do in this book is that it's set in this very interesting setting. So Palm Beach almost becomes a character in and of itself. But like you said, the issues, the themes, the things that they're dealing with could be anywhere. But in this kind of rarefied society that they're in, it just is this pressure cooker. I mean, it just adds this, it makes things just so much more difficult. One thing though, readers, so if you haven't picked up this book yet, what adds to the complexity of everything, I think also are the main characters, their partners. Elodie's husband, James, and Aubrey's partner, Tyler. So you're in for a treat as you go through these women's stories to see how these decisions affect these relationships. And so anyway, I think, if you look at the cover and these girls are just whispering to each other, you might think it's something that this might look like something light, but there are some light moments and things, but this is a really compelling story that just moves and takes you into some really hard questions. And it does ask the question about those bioethics that you're asking about. And I'm thinking, okay, how is this going to work when Aubrey gives birth to this child and it's really her child, but it's James's sperm, and how is all this going to work? And so I think you've just done such a beautiful job here. I would love to know about your writing process and what a typical day looks like for you in your writing, because you're still writing. As far as I understand, you're writing the next book that's set in Palm Beach. What's a typical writing day look like for you? Tell us about your writing process.
A writing day has really changed, of course, because of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was supposed to be on a book tour starting this past fall, I told the college where I have taught for so many years that I would not be teaching because I thought I'd be traveling around. And so instead, I've really, not including tonight, I've become pretty good at like just zooming in and doing all sorts of events. And the rest of the days now, I mostly write. And it's really a luxury. I'm writing my 16th book, and I
oh man,
so many years that I teach an 8:30 class and then a 10 o'clock class, and then meet the students and do advisement or go to a meeting. And then the afternoon and evenings are dedicated to writing. And now it's very different. And as we know, we've all had home offices, not just writers, but now many people have home offices. And so I write as much as I can. And when I write, I always think of a theme. So, you were talking about the story of a Palm Beach scandal. And one of my major themes the way I write is I think of the theme while I'm writing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the writing shows, underscores the idea that seems so important, that is important to me. And so in this book, I kept asking myself, who are we and how do we know ourselves as women until we're put to the test?
Mm.
So each woman in this novel is tested: Aubrey, Elodie, and Veronica, and even Mimi, the mother-in-law. And I always ask myself, and before I write the book, I outline it in detail. I think you and I talked about this.
Yeah, I outline too.
And I also look at those themes that I need to convey in the story. And
how long? Yeah, go ahead.
How
long are your outlines? I'm curious.
Maybe 20 pages.
20 pages. Do you go by chapter, or how do you?
Go by chapter, but that's partly, Joni, because I come out of the nonfiction world.
Uh-huh.
And the nonfiction world is so succinct in terms of, for me, I have an idea. I have a hunch. For instance, when I did my study on mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law, I think I already knew as a daughter-in-law that the daughter-in-law is not as invested. A present day daughter-in-law might not be as interested in pleasing her mother-in-law or being involved as, say, the generation before. And what is the glue to the, well, if there's if children are born into this marriage, but we have triangle. That's another theme. I'm always looking at triangles. So
Yeah.
mothers-in-law, daughters-in-law, and the husband/son. That's
Mhm.
quite a loaded triangle.
Yeah.
So I think about that a lot. And, it goes, so there's the chapter outline. And because I've always worked on themes for nonfiction, and I've always like, I had the hunch, I write the book, I do the research, I listen to the women, and then I come to the conclusion. Novels are not quite like that, but the idea of an annotated outline still sticks with me for either genre.
Do you come up with plot first and then the characters, or characters first?
I think I always know the beginning and the end.
Uh-huh.
And I know my characters, and then I have to figure out how to get there.
What is the hardest part of writing for you?
Rewriting.
The rewriting.
Like it? Do you like to rewrite?
Um,
I love it.
I do actually. For me, it's the first go around. It's figuring out how everything's going to happen, the plot, figuring out how it's all going to come together. Once I've got that, then I think the rewriting, that works okay for me. Yeah. Ah,
Plot, I'm friendly. I'm also in a writing group, I should say, for anyone who's listening and cares
oh yeah,
about
me too.
the idea of a writing group is just so useful for me. And I urge writers, everywhere to do it. But we talk about plot a lot, and it's so interesting how many writers really struggle. Oh yes, the plot. You know the place, you know the characters, you know the time period, you know the yearnings, but how to move it along is hard.
Do you know, that was very freeing for me as a writer to find out how many writers struggle. When I first began years ago, I don't think I realized that. I thought, no, if you're a good writer, it usually flows pretty well. I don't think I appreciated how hard it is.
I agree with you. I think that writers who say, I know one writer in my writing group who always says, after we talk about what needs to be rewritten, he'll say to me, it'll be fun. And I'll say, sorry, it's compelling, but it might not be fun.
Yeah, I heard David McCullough said that that writing problems are thinking problems. That's when we're really stuck. It's a thinking problem, and that's why it's so hard. So if we can get past that, when we're stuck, that is. And I thought, okay, that's interesting.
I know that as a teacher, that I have said to my students, and then I try to tell myself when I'm sitting alone at my desk, be as clear as you can be and know what you want to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where are we going with this? What are you really trying to say? And so that's sometimes what one needs as a writer, is to just be that basic.
Yeah.
And, the other part of this book that mattered so much to me is that it wasn't just the sister story, but I wanted to really look at Veronica, the mother, and Elodie, the two married characters, and ask of them what the dangerous elements are in being a wife. How much does Elodie sacrifice when James tells her that he can't live without a child? Then suddenly they're not really a team. And this is not a spoiler, because this is what sets the story in motion. So we learn it early on.
Yeah.
And I also really wanted to look at and I think we mentioned this before, but what privilege and education, what does that do to people? And of course, there's so much writing about it now, and talking about the advantages that we have if we are privileged, and that it creates opportunity. But what creates happiness? And why are relationships so complicated? And how often do women lose themselves in these relationships?
And I would add, you're asking these questions while you present us people who have everything that the world might say should contribute to one's happiness.
Right.
So it's,
Because the societal message is that if we have an abundance of riches, materialism, and chances,
yeah,
that we will be happy.
Yeah.
But in fact, we know that it's not the case.
yeah.
And that's very confusing.
Yeah. In fact, in chapter 2, I was just looking at your book again. In chapter 2, I think it begins with Elodie thinking of her sister's words that are, "You married a 10, Elodie. You married a 10." Okay, so not only does she have, they're building this new gorgeous home, and she has just everything. I mean, her education, her husband's education, beautiful cars, beautiful clothes, everything, and the beautiful husband even. Where does happiness come from? So it's a great question.
It's a really, it's a serious question for women. And I hope that when readers are reading this book, they'll think about that we're taught as females. And since so much information is disseminated constantly, we're constantly told that we should want the glittering prizes. So we would want, of course, enough money to feel safe, as I said before, in a capitalistic society, the husband, the house, the children, the career, beauty, opportunity. And so what happens when it's really not the right fit? When you're losing yourself even in this abundance of riches? And why is there so much female competition? Because of my nonfiction book, Tripping the Prom Queen, about women in rivalry, I really wanted Elodie to be positioned in a way that when the young mothers came in with their young children to the society library, she felt a pang because none of those children, not one was hers. And where does that baby lust come from?
Yeah.
And should she have just, was she just missing a big piece according to the neighbors and friends?
Yeah. As you were talking about all of this, I also had the thought, though, that those questions are raised for men, I think, too. Even though the focus in your book are on the female characters, I think all of those same questions are there for men and their roles and what society may pressure them to think that they need and the roles they should play and the way they should be. That's there too.
But what I would say is that it isn't that there aren't as many expectations and a checklist for men as well, but that the accessibility is greater and broader for men.
Yeah, I would agree with you there.
With tokenism and sexism and women being marginalized. And until there's equal pay for equal work, anyone who doesn't get the same pay as the highest paid man, it's inexplicable.
Yeah.
I know this is a little off topic, but years ago, when the Obama administration did a research project on the state of women, and historically, the only other president, I believe, who had done that, the only other White House that had done it was the Kennedy White House in the early 60s. And so I was interviewed by a journalist from the Christian Science Monitor. And I remember that when she said, "Could you comment on it?" And I said, "Sure." And she said, "Well, what do you think?" I think the result had come out, and please, again, don't quote me, but I think it was 78 cents to the dollar at that time. Yeah. And so it was much more dismal in the 60s, obviously. But she said to me, "Well, what do you think?" And I said, "What can I think? It's a blatant form of bias."
Yeah.
It's unspeakable. And even in this marriage of Elodie and James, just circling back to the novel, Joni, so Elodie has what we would call pink collar work. She has a real job. She loves it. She works hard. She's really trying to revolutionize the speaking, the speakers at at the Literary Society. But James is the one who rules because he earns the gold. And, there's really a difference.
And he's the one that puts the pressure on her to ask her sister to carry the baby. He's the one that forces that issue.
And I wanted to really look at what happens to them as a result of his ask. What a big ask, right?
It was a big ask. Mm-hmm. And and it was important that that the child had his genes, right? It was important that the baby had his genes. Yeah.
And we look at male ego, and we look at what people feel about family, and again, another serious issue that I wanted to look at.
Yeah, such important issues. I want to ask, I know we're getting towards the end here. You are so well versed on so many gender issues and gender inequality and things that we face as women today. What would you like women to take away from this book? You're not didactic in any way. The book is a wonderful read. It's not preachy in any way at all. You tell a compelling story. But what would you like women to take away from this book?
That just because we're told that we're meant to be a certain way doesn't mean that we have to do it. To have the strength of your convictions, and if there's something that wakes us from our sleepwalking, be bold enough, be strong enough to understand it, to understand that being the pleaser or the good girl is not the only way to be rewarded, and to lose oneself is a terrible price to pay. As a daughter, a wife, a mother, in any role that's so highly touted in our society. And so I really wanted to look at how individual we are, and is that really allowed?
That is powerful. Thank you. As a mother of 2 young adult daughters, I'm saying yes. I love that.
Well, the idea that we always have options.
We do.
We
More
do.
and more. But there's so much work to be done still.
Oh, yes.
So, absolutely. So, all right. Well, Jared, where are we at on time?
So we have about a little less than 10 minutes left.
Okay.
And we do have a couple of questions we wanted to ask.
Okay. Do we want to go to those now, or do I have time to ask a couple more questions? Where would you like to go?
You have time to ask a couple more. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Oh, oops. Sorry, I lost you there for a second. Would you tell me a little bit about the surprise ending? Not that you can tell us about it, but what can you tell us about the ending that's not a spoiler?
Well, this is my 3rd novel, and I've heard it from readers about how my books have surprise endings, and there are surprise endings for so many of us in real life, in real time as women. And just because we put one foot in front of the other and we do the right thing, it doesn't guarantee us anything at all, because that's how life is. And what fascinates me about women is the ability to draw from our inner strength and also to be acrobatic. So the idea that one expects the right result, and we're really taught that. I mean, I don't know many women of any age in our culture who women who have not been raised on fairy tales. at least one or two, at least Cinderella, at least Snow White. How about Sleeping Beauty, right? Wake up, there's the prince. But you know, how devastating is it to learn that in fact the person to rely on is yourself, and to really understand who you are amidst all the noise and the chaos. And so that's really why the endings are surprising.
I love that. Thank you. I had this question, and these are just Brene Brown, when she interviews people, she has a couple of just like questions that are sort of just to get to know you. But I would love to know what book you are currently reading. And I know you read actually a nonfiction and a fiction book at a time. Would you tell us what you're currently reading?
Okay, I'm reading the new Isha Guru, Clara and the Sun. I bought it when it first came out, and I'm now reading it. And for nonfiction, I actually just picked up a book about, and I'm sorry, I know Jared would know, I just got it today. It was written up in the Wall Street Journal, and it's about the women fighting the Nazis, and it's a nonfiction book.
Okay.
And I'm also reading Sherry, but I am, because remember I read a few books at once.
Yeah, you do.
Sherry Turkle's new nonfiction book, The Empathy Diaries. But today I just got this one. So, you know, in fact, my Mac Air is on top of Sherry Turkle's book right here. I just,
Great.
so, you know, really good stuff. I mean, really interesting books.
Here's my last question. What has been the response from readers that you've talked to? What are you getting from them about this book, about the themes that we've talked about overall? What are you hearing from your readers?
I've really, thank you for asking. I've heard really good things. People seem to really like this. They've commented that it's, you know, a story within a story, because, you know, that aspect of it. And then someone emailed me through my website and told me that she thought that Bradley Cooper would be a very good James. Would be a very good Elodie. And I thought, wow, that's okay. So
Did she give you any other casting ideas?
no, but the Bradley Cooper was real. Yeah, there was something. Also hearing that readers like the men as well, which makes me happy that they like the characters.
Tyler's my favorite.
Oh yeah, we all need to.
I love Tyler. All right. Well, Jared, do you have some questions for Susanna?
Yes. Well, first I want to say thank you, Susanna, and thank you, Joni. Susanna, it was really great to hear a lot more about your novel. It sounds like you have tackled a lot of really deep and layered themes in a work of fiction, which is really cool to hear and really exciting. As a reader, I love nonfiction, and I'm trying to read more works of fiction. So it's really awesome to hear you as a nonfiction reader creating works of fiction that still has such real and deep themes and that are so relevant. So thank you. And the question that I want to ask, and it's really just because I know we're running a little low on time and I want to make sure we're out of here. So the question that I'm going to ask is, it's actually National Poetry Month, and we've been celebrating that all month long here at Capitol Books. Are there any works of poetry by women that you feel are important that we should check out?
I love poetry. As I told you, I started as a poet. I love Anne Sexton's work. I really do. And Sharon Olds. And I think that Adrienne Rich is also a poet that's really, and Sylvia Plath, of course. But I just recently, I was reading some Anne Sexton, rereading, and I just found I find it so touching and so visceral. Really wonderful poetry.
Thank you. And just actually another follow-up question, because last month was Women's History Month, and we had a lot of books by women that we featured just in general. Growing up, what were the women authors that you looked up to?
Okay, so not an author, but a topic that I was perhaps obsessed with was Anne Boleyn, and like Henry, very unfortunate wife. And so I'd say I read a few books about Anne Boleyn. I was very interested in learning about famous women, Eleanor Roosevelt and Marie Curie, and even, you know, Abigail Adams. And I mean, I just always wanted to read about them. And books that I liked, oh my goodness, I think I started with books like the Nancy Drew series. I mean, really, but Louisa May Alcott, I always knew was really in a class by herself. And I, you know, look, I thought as a younger woman, and I do feel the same today, that there's no one like Margaret Atwood. From when The Handmaid's Tale came out, you know, all those years ago to her, you know, and Cat's Eye, that her earlier work. So always intrigued by women writers.
Thank you. Thank you. And with that, we're going to go ahead and move into closing comments. I'm going to ask Heidi, do you have any closing comments before we wrap up?
No, people can buy the book from us.
Okay, yeah.
Encourage people to
Yes.
get it from us.
Yes. So we have her book here, A Palm Beach Scandal. It's available in store and online at capitalbooksonk.com, or you can just come into the store. We're open Monday through Saturday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. and Sundays from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. And we also deliver locally for free, and we can ship things via USPS as well. And I want to also say, Joni, thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to your book, which comes out, I wrote it down. Joni's book comes out May 25th. It's called The Audacity of Sarah Grayson. So we're looking forward to that. Yes, would you like to say a few words about your book?
And I'd like to, if we have time, I want to say a few words too.
Oh yes, we're gonna come back around to you as well.
Sure. So this book is about 32-year-old Sarah Grayson. She's a washed-up writing teacher / greeting card writer. She's barely hanging on to her day job. Her mom is a world-famous suspense novelist who tragically dies. And so speculation immediately emerges about who will finish the final book in her mother's best-selling series. So 3 weeks after her mother's death, Sarah finds out that it's her mother's dying wish that Sarah complete the final volume in her mother's world-famous series. For Sarah, this is her worst nightmare. She is just hanging on to life. Her last week's biggest win was basically resetting the microwave clock. She's just trying to find shoes that match. She's just trying to make it through her day. So at first she's thinking, there's no way I can write this book. There's no way I can possibly do this. But in some strange turn of events, she actually ends up taking it on. And so this book follows Sarah's journey of stepping into her mother's shoes. But stepping into these shoes means stumbling onto some family secrets, things that she didn't know about her mother, about her father who died when she was just 7 years old. And so it kind of sets her on this journey. So it has a lot of humor and I think heart. And so you'll see what happens as Sarah tries to finish this book while the world waits. And so this is kind of really, this is me writing the book, I think, but, but that's, anyway, Sarah Grayson. So, May 25th.
Thank you. We look forward to that. Susanna?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that when I was asked to endorse Joni's book, I was so happy because you can't put it down. It has a lot of twists and turns, again, family secrets. But what, of course, really resonated with me is Sarah and her sister's story. And although the mother does die early, no spoiler, I felt her presence, and I just really admire what Joni has put together.
Oh, thank you. Thank
Really
you.
very good.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And just, I just want to thank everyone for being here. And is there anything else on your hearts that you want to say before we wrap it up?
What a treat it is to be at such a special bookstore. I just love it, and I'm so happy that you asked me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Same here. And our best to Lily.
Thank you. Yeah, y'all can come and meet her. Yes, come meet Lily, our dog. Yeah.
That's right. Mm.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. And once again, you can pick up the book here at our store at Capital Books. Have a
Thank
good night,
you.
everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.